The lights inside the Meyerson Symphony Center in downtown Dallas were brighter than usual that night. Not the elegant golden glow the venue was known for, but the harsh, clinical glare of live broadcast cameras. The room was packed, news crews lined the edges, cables snaking around polished shoes and high heels. This wasn't a concert, it wasn't a gala. It was politics on full display. The event had been built for weeks. American voices, a national conversation on race, policy, and the future. And now it was happening live in front of millions. At center stage stood President Donald Trump, still in office, still controversial. His red tie hung stiffly against his white shirt, his hands resting on the edges of his podium as he scanned the crowd. To his right, a panel of lawmakers from both parties, and among them, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett from Texas's 30th District. Jasmine was composed, almost unnervingly calm. Her black suit was sharp, her hair pinned back with precision. She'd kept her prep private. No big team, no advisors hovering, just her binder, a worn yellow legal pad, and a mind that never forgot. The moderator, a gray-haired veteran from PBS, opened with something polite and scripted. Tonight, we're bringing together leaders from across the political spectrum for a real conversation, one our country's been needing for too long. Then came the first softball question. Mr. President, in recent interviews, you've spoken about your administration's impact on minority communities. Could you tell us what you believe is your strongest achievement in that area? Trump didn't miss a beat. Well, thank you. I've always said it, and the numbers prove it. Black unemployment was at its lowest in history under my administration. Nobody wants to talk about that, but it's true. We created opportunity zones. We funded HBCUs permanently. I've done more for Black Americans than any president since Abraham Lincoln, and some say even more. The crowd was mixed, polite claps, a few loud cheers, some silence. Jasmine glanced up. She didn't scribble a note. She didn't flinch. Trump added, "And you know the fake news won't admit that, but people know. They can see what I've done. They can feel it." A pause, then the moderator turned to Crockett. "Congresswoman Crockett, your thoughts?" Jasmine adjusted the mic slightly, cleared her throat once. Her voice was soft but focused, like a laser. "Mr. President," she said, looking directly at him, "Black people are not bullet points in a speech. We're not statistics you pull out when you need applause. We live the outcomes of your policies. We carry them." Trump didn't speak yet. "I grew up in Duncanville," she continued, 15 minutes from here. "My neighbors lost homes during your tax overhaul. My uncle couldn't get a small business loan after the pandemic. And when we protested police brutality, we weren't asking for unemployment rates. We were asking to live." A low hum moved through the crowd. Phones were already being raised. Trump leaned toward his mic, but Jasmine kept going. "I've read the numbers, sir, but I've also read the stories, and I've lived some of them. And when you tell people that you've done more for Black Americans than Lincoln, we hear something very different than you think we do." Trump raised his eyebrows as if amused. He muttered something to the senator beside him, who gave a nervous half-smile. The moderator stepped in quickly. "Let's give everyone space to respond. President Trump, we'll come back to you in just a moment." Jasmine didn't look away, not once. But the air had already shifted, and the real tension was just getting started. The next moment was quiet, too quiet for television. Even the moderator hesitated, but Jasmine didn't. "Before we go any further," she said, "let's be honest about something. There's a pattern here, not just in policy, but in how you talk about us, how you talk to us, and who you choose to listen to." Trump rolled his shoulders back slightly, as if settling in for a sparring match. He smirked but said nothing. "You mentioned Black unemployment," Jasmine continued, "but you never mentioned Black wages, or Black maternal mortality, or that we were dying twice as fast during COVID and didn't get the same access to testing, to vaccines, to recovery funding." Trump finally leaned in. "Excuse me, that's just false." But she lifted her hand calmly. "Mr. President, you'll have your turn. I waited for mine." The audience stirred, a few gasps, a few claps. The moderator looked between them, unsure whether to intervene. Jasmine wasn't raising her voice. She didn't need to. Her tone was razor-sharp and steady, the kind that people lean forward to hear. "You talk about what you've done for us," she said, "but not what you've said about us. We remember the NFL protests. You called those players sons of bitches. You told them to be grateful. Trump was growing visibly irritated now. I was talking about disrespecting the flag, he said, almost through his teeth. Jasmine nodded slowly, as if absorbing that. The flag can survive a knee, Mr. President. Some of our children can't survive a traffic stop. That one landed. A low, unsettled reaction buzzed through the crowd again. Some of the other lawmakers on stage shifted in their chairs. Trump sat up straighter, his face flushed slightly. I represent people who've been profiled, redlined, locked out of generational wealth, Jasmine said. People who watched your response to Charlottesville and heard you say there were very fine people on both sides. That's not what I said, Trump barked. But it's what we heard, she answered. You said stand back and stand by to the Proud Boys on national television. You called countries where my ancestors came from, Haiti, Nigeria, shithole countries. We didn't make that up. Trump was shaking his head, but his silence said more than his denial. Crockett leaned slightly closer to her mic, her voice dropping lower. Not for effect, but because what she said next didn't need volume to cut. You can't say you respect Black Americans while constantly disrespecting Black lives, Black intellect, and Black history. We heard you when you mocked Congresswoman Presley, when you told Ilhan Omar to go back to her country, when you attacked Maxine Waters and called her low IQ. Trump leaned into his mic again, frustration rising. That's because she is low IQ. Loud groans and murmurs erupted in the audience. One man in the back stood up and shouted, "That's racist," before being asked to sit by security. But Jasmine didn't flinch. This is the exact thing I'm talking about, she said calmly, pointing not at Trump, but at the moment. You can't help yourself. And every time you do this, every time you fall back on these dog whistles, you remind people exactly who you are. The moderator finally spoke up. Congresswoman Crockett, just for clarity, are you suggesting the president's rhetoric is intentionally racist? I'm not suggesting, she replied. I'm saying it plainly. And anyone who's lived as a Black person in America doesn't need subtitles to understand what he means. Trump was breathing heavily now, lips pressed together. For once, he didn't interrupt. The crowd was silent, a new kind of silence, one that didn't ask for a rebuttal, one that felt like a verdict had already been rendered. The cameras caught it all, every twitch, every eye flicker, every grimace. Jasmine turned slightly toward the audience, not with arrogance, but with intention. Her next words were slower, like the final notes of a courtroom argument. You don't have to scream slurs to be racist. Sometimes racism looks like indifference. Sometimes it wears a suit and shakes hands, and still signs bills that make it harder for people like me to vote, to breathe, to live free. She paused. And I'm not saying that to win a headline. I'm saying it because it's true. But the hardest truths weren't even out yet, and Jasmine had come with more than words. Jasmine didn't skip a beat. With her left hand, she reached into the folder she'd placed under her chair. It wasn't dramatic, it was careful, deliberate. She opened it, flipped past a few sheets, then lifted one page to the mic. I want to be clear, she said. This isn't personal. It's not emotional. It's documented. It's legal record. She held the paper up slightly so the camera could catch a glimpse. United States vs. Trump Management Inc., 1973. The Department of Justice sued Mr. Trump and his father for racial discrimination in housing. They had codes written on applications, C for colored, turned away Black families, offered different terms if you were white. The moderator shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Jasmine placed the document gently on the desk in front of her and picked up another, a 1990 interview with Vanity Fair. John O'Donnell, one of your former executives, quoted you saying, and I quote, "Black guys counting my money, I hate it. The only kind of people I want counting my money are short guys that wear yarmulkes every day." You never sued him. You never denied it under oath. Trump shook his head, chuckling bitterly. That guy was a nobody, a liar. And yet you gave him an executive title. Jasmine shot back, not missing a step. Funny how often your team becomes liars after they leave. She reached for another sheet. You took out a full-page ad in 4 New York newspapers in 1989 calling for the death penalty. specifically for 5 Black and Latino boys in the Central Park case. You said, bring back the death penalty. Bring back our police. They were children, innocent, exonerated by DNA years later. You never apologized, not once. Trump opened his mouth, but she cut him off, not with noise, but with calm, cold clarity. You said they probably did something, as if wrongful convictions still justified their pain. And you think Black Americans forget that? You think mothers don't hold on to that memory the same way they hold their sons? Her voice didn't rise, but the weight of her words filled the room. The moderator looked stunned. Some panelists looked at their shoes. The audience was absolutely still. Trump took a sip of water, trying to regroup. But Jasmine wasn't done. You revoked diversity training in federal institutions. You called it un-American propaganda. You called it divisive to teach the real history of slavery, redlining, voter suppression, and mass incarceration. She raised another document, this one stamped with a presidential order number. You called the 1618 Project a threat to national unity, and when educators tried to teach history that included us, not just tolerated us, but centered us, you labeled them radicals. Trump leaned into the mic, trying to laugh. That's because they are radicals. They're rewriting history. Jasmine blinked. The only people who fear the truth are the ones it convicts. That line made heads turn. I didn't come here to play respectability politics, she added. I didn't come here to be polite about injustice. Because Black Americans have spent generations being polite and still ended up on the receiving end of policies that were designed to break us. She tapped her folder one more time. Let's talk about your administration's push for voter ID laws in majority Black counties. Let's talk about your attempt to throw out legally cast ballots in Detroit, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, cities with large Black populations. Trump interrupted, voice tense. Now that's about fraud. Everyone knows it. Jasmine didn't flinch. You know what people know? They know when they're being targeted, when their voices are being diluted, when their votes are treated as suspicious just because of where they live or what they look like. Trump rolled his eyes, waving a hand. Here we go again. Yes, Jasmine said softly. Here we go again. That's the point. It always goes again because it was never fixed. The moderator leaned forward. Congresswoman, are you saying the president's record disqualifies him from speaking on race? Jasmine turned toward the camera. Not Trump, not the moderator, not the crowd. The camera. I'm saying the record speaks for itself, and anyone who hears it, who really hears it, needs to ask themselves what kind of leadership they're willing to excuse. But Jasmine wasn't just there to indict the past. She was building a case for something much deeper. Trump's body language had changed. He was no longer leaning forward in confidence. He was leaning back in discomfort. His usual smirks came slower now, stretched thinner, as if he were waiting for someone to toss him a life raft. But no one on that stage was moving. He pulled the mic closer. Look, Jasmine, or whatever your name is. A few people in the crowd gasped audibly. My name is Congresswoman Crockett, she replied coolly, and I've earned every syllable of it. Trump waved a dismissive hand. You've got a binder full of fake news? That's what this is. Same garbage CNN's been spinning for years. I've done more for Black Americans than anyone on this stage. A laugh burst out from someone in the front row. Not a kind laugh. The kind that leaks out when someone says something so absurd your body reacts before your mind does. I created opportunity zones, Trump continued. I gave permanent funding to Black colleges. I passed criminal justice reform. But do I get credit for that? No, because people like you want to paint everything as racism. Crockett didn't blink. People like me? Trump paused, realizing he'd walked into something. He tried to walk it back. No, I mean Democrats. You're all obsessed with race. She smiled, but there was no humor behind it. We're not obsessed with race. We're impacted by it every single day. The fact that you think talking about racism is worse than experiencing it, that's the problem. The moderator stepped in, trying to break the tension with a new question, but neither Trump nor Crockett took the bait. Let me ask you something, Jasmine said, now turning toward Trump again, leaning just a little forward. You say you helped Black Americans. Did you ever listen to them? Not your donors, not the ones in hats at rallies. I mean the single mother in Fort Worth who couldn't afford childcare when you slashed community grants. I mean the teenager in Shreveport who couldn't get into a decent school because your education secretary tried to gut public funding. I mean the family in Jackson who watched their water turn brown while your EPA rolled back clean water rules. Trump rolled his eyes. Now you're blaming me for water problems? I'm saying leadership means taking responsibility, even for the things you didn't cause. But let's continue. Trump leaned forward, raising his voice. I did listen. I had Kanye. I had Diamond and Silk. Ah, so that's your focus group? Jasmine said. Two entertainers and a YouTube duo? No mayors, no community organizers, no school superintendents, just people who clapped for you on TV? Laughter this time came from the audience in waves. It wasn't a joke, but it felt like release. You don't get to pat yourself on the back because you found three black people who said nice things about you, she continued. That's not outreach. That's optics. Trump sat in silence, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then quietly, no, she said, I'm just not afraid of you. The line echoed. The moderator tried to steer the conversation again, but the dynamic had shifted. The president wasn't dominating the stage anymore. He was defending his presence on it. Behind them, a ticker ran across the bottom of the screen. Twitter posts were already flooding in. Clips were being clipped. Hashtags were forming. Hurry Jasmine speaks, receipts, and respect. I'm not afraid. The moderator finally broke through the moment. Let's shift gears slightly. Congressman Randall, you've worked on bipartisan education reform. What's your take? The camera cut to an older white man 2 chairs down, but his voice came out thin, distracted. No one was really listening anymore. Not in that room, not at home. Jasmine sat back slightly, folding her folder closed. She'd said what needed to be said, not because it was comfortable, not because it would trend, but because the room had been too quiet for too long, and silence is never neutral. But the silence was gone now, and something raw was about to surface next. The moderator tried to move the spotlight, but the air hadn't shifted with him. The weight of what just happened still hung over the panel like heavy rain clouds. The camera panned slowly, settling again on Jasmine, who didn't ask for more time, but took it anyway. Since we're talking about impact, she began, her tone softer now, let me tell you about my cousin Darnell. Trump leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. He lived in Longview, Texas. Good kid. Smiled more than he spoke. He loved drawing superheroes, little sketchbooks stacked in his room. He wanted to be an architect one day. The room quieted again, not because she asked it to, but because something in her voice told everyone to listen. One night when he was 17, he was driving home from his part-time job at Sonic, got pulled over for having a broken taillight. He reached into the glove compartment for his insurance card. A pause. The officer said he moved too fast. Darnell never made it home. Trump shifted in his chair. Jasmine looked down at her hands briefly, then up again. He wasn't a headline. He wasn't a trending hashtag. There was no protest, no marches, just another family with an empty chair at Sunday dinner, and no one to call for help. She let that hang. You want to talk about policy? You want to talk about your record? Let's talk about what it feels like to grow up knowing that any encounter with law enforcement might be your last. Let's talk about why I ran for Congress, not for power, not for clout, but because I'm tired of burying people like Darnell. Her voice cracked slightly, but not in weakness. In proof. Proof she wasn't just reading off a page. She was living what she was saying. You tell us to be grateful. Grateful for jobs. Grateful for opportunity zones. Grateful to be here. She looked at Trump again. We're not guests in this country, Mr. President. We built it. Our hands helped raise the buildings you've slapped your name on. Our votes made your office possible. And yet somehow, we're still waiting for the full weight of citizenship. Trump stared straight ahead, refusing to respond. Maybe because he didn't know how, maybe because he knew too well what she meant. And I don't care if this makes you uncomfortable, Jasmine continued, because we've been uncomfortable for centuries. Uncomfortable in classrooms that erased our history, in hospitals that ignored our pain, in banks that denied our loans. and in cities where a Confederate statue gets more protection than a black teenager walking home with a bag of Skittles. A woman in the crowd near the front wiped away a tear. Jasmine didn't try to soften the moment. She stayed in it, deep in it. There's a reason I came with papers tonight, not to embarrass anyone, but because we've been gaslit for too long, told we're imagining things, told that if we just work harder, speak softer, wear a suit, things will change. She paused again. Darnell wore a polo shirt. He still didn't make it. The moderator looked stunned. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Trump finally spoke quietly. I'm sorry for your cousin. Jasmine met his eyes. Thank you, but he's not just my cousin. He's our responsibility. The system didn't break that night. It functioned exactly how it was designed to. That sentence hit like a brick. This isn't about party lines anymore, she said. It's about whether we're going to fix the design or keep pretending it's broken accidentally. The moderator cleared his throat. Congresswoman, do you believe the current administration? But the question never landed. Jasmine wasn't finished. I came here tonight not because I enjoy these debates, she said, now turning slightly to address the crowd. I came because there are young people watching, black kids watching, people who felt invisible every time a politician used our pain as punctuation. She leaned into the mic one last time. I came here so they'd know we see them, we hear them, and we're not done fighting yet. But the fight was only half over, and the pushback was just about to begin. The silence that followed Jasmine's last words was heavier than applause. It was the kind of quiet that came when people were rethinking what they thought they knew. But Trump wasn't someone who let silence hold for long. He scoffed, shaking his head. You know what the real problem is? People like you want everything to be about race. Every issue, every policy, it's always about color with you. Jasmine sat back in her chair, arms resting on the table. She didn't even look at him right away. Trump kept going. I've built businesses. I've worked with everyone. Black, white, Hispanic, you name it. But somehow I'm still called a racist just because I say what everyone else is thinking, but too scared to say. He turned toward the audience, trying to read their faces, trying to reset the tone. America's tired of this. Tired of being called bigots. Tired of the victim game. Tired of this culture of blame. The moderator raised his hand. Mr. President, let's... But Trump cut him off. No, let's tell the truth. I've been nothing but successful. I didn't inherit this country's problems. I tried to fix them. And now people like her, he pointed sharply in Jasmine's direction, want to tell me I'm the villain. Jasmine finally looked at him. Mr. President, nobody has to call you the villain. You've spent years writing that part for yourself. A murmur rippled through the room. Trump leaned forward, irritated. You don't know anything about what I've done. You think standing here with a folder of complaints makes you qualified to judge a presidency? I think living through the impact of those decisions makes me more than qualified, Jasmine said. And I think Americans are tired too, but not in the way you think. They're tired of leaders who cause the damage and then deny it. Trump's face turned redder. You're lucky to be on this stage with me, he said. It was quiet. I didn't come here to feel lucky, she replied. I came here to tell the truth. The moderator stepped in again, voice tight. Let's try to keep this from becoming personal. It's already personal, Jasmine said, turning to him. It's personal when your kids can't walk to school safely. It's personal when your name is more threatening on a job application than your qualifications. It's personal when your president talks about your community like a war zone while ignoring the policies that made it one. The crowd began to respond, clapping, some cheering. It wasn't loud, it was sharp, focused, real. Trump turned to one of the lawmakers sitting to his right. Can you believe this? The man hesitated before responding. She's not wrong. Trump narrowed his eyes. What did you say? I said she's not wrong. It was subtle, but it cracked something. Trump sat back, stunned. It was the first public break from his own side. The moderator tried to pivot again. Perhaps we can hear from... But Jasmine leaned forward again. No, let's finish this moment. Her voice was lower now, like someone closing the door behind a hard truth. This country doesn't change because people in power suddenly become more compassionate. It changes because people stand up, speak out, refuse to let silence be the price of survival. She turned back to Trump. You don't have to like me. You don't even have to agree with me. But you will respect that I came here with more than talking points. I came here with history, with facts, with lived reality. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good. Trump scoffed again, almost laughing. But Jasmine looked at the camera. Because progress was never built on comfort. The moment was real now. No more performance, no more sound bites. Two people on stage, one defending his legacy, the other demanding the truth be seen for what it is. But the room wasn't the only place watching. Outside those walls, a much louder reckoning was already underway. Outside the Meyerson Symphony Center, the night air in Dallas was still and humid. But inside, the mood had flipped completely. The audience that had once seemed mixed, polite applause, quiet nods, was now leaning into every word Jasmine said. Some stood with arms crossed, absorbing. Others had phones out, not to distract themselves, but to record. People weren't just watching, they were tracking. The moderator attempted to pull the discussion back to policy. Let's shift slightly to criminal justice reform, an area where, Mr. President, your administration received bipartisan praise for the First Step Act. Trump straightened. Finally, something he could use. That's right. I signed criminal justice reform, not Obama. Me, I freed more black people from prison than any president before me. They forget that. The moderator turned to Jasmine. Congresswoman, do you want to respond? She gave a small nod. First step was important, she said. No one's denying that. But it wasn't a gift. People had been pushing for that legislation long before you took office. Families, advocates, attorneys who sat with men serving life for nonviolent drug charges. That bill passed in spite of how you talk about us, not because of it. Trump interrupted. I signed it. I made it law. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. You signed it. You didn't write it. You didn't understand it. And after you signed it, you undermined it by reinstating federal executions. She looked at him directly. You undid your own progress because you were more interested in appearing tough than being just. That landed hard. A woman in the back row clapped once, slowly. Others joined, then more. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was the kind of clap that said, "We see you." Trump's jaw clenched. Before he could answer, a young voice rang out from the audience. A teenager, maybe 16, stood up, wearing a plain t-shirt and jeans. He didn't look prepped. He looked like he came with his older sister and hadn't planned to speak. Can I ask something? He said, loud enough for the mic to pick up. The moderator looked surprised but nodded. Go ahead. The boy didn't hesitate. My cousin got shot 2 years ago by a cop who said he thought he had a gun. He didn't. He had a cell phone. No charges, no trial, just nothing. He turned to Trump. What should I tell my little brother when he asks why nothing happened? What should I say when he says, do they think we're less important? Trump blinked, caught off guard. The boy didn't look angry, just tired. Tired in a way no kid should be. Trump leaned into the mic. That's tragic. I'm sorry for your loss. But we have great police in this country. The best. Sometimes mistakes happen, and it's sad. But we can't paint all officers with the same brush. The room was quiet again, but not in agreement. Jasmine broke the silence. You don't have to paint all officers with one brush to acknowledge the pattern. You just have to stop pretending the brush doesn't exist. The teenager nodded slowly. He sat down. And for the first time that night, Trump seemed smaller. Not physically, but in presence. His words felt like they were bouncing off the room instead of landing in it. Jasmine continued, more gently now. Every time someone like that young man tells his story and gets met with deflection, the message is clear. Your pain is inconvenient. Your grief is too political. But we have to stop treating Black trauma as a public relations problem. She turned to the crowd. We cannot keep asking our children to swallow their rage just so adults can avoid discomfort. That was it. The moment where the audience turned completely. People clapped, not out of formality, but because something in them had shifted. Some stood up. Others wiped their eyes. No screaming, no chants, just acknowledgement. Trump sat back, expression unreadable. The moderator looked to Jasmine again. Congresswoman, If you had the president's platform for one day, what would you say to black families watching right now? She didn't pause. I'd say, you matter. Your life matters. Your story matters, even when the system tries to edit you out. And I'd tell you this, you're not alone. But outside that room, those words were already catching fire, and the rest of the country was about to feel it. The segment ended just before 9 p.m., but the story was only beginning. As the credits rolled and the stage lights dimmed, phones were already lighting up across the country. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Reddit. Everywhere, clips of Jasmine Crockett calmly confronting the president were being uploaded, clipped, stitched, subtitled, and shared. Before she even left the building, her quote, "We're not guests in this country, we built it," was already a meme, a tweet storm, a call to action. In a coffee shop in Baltimore, a group of college students paused their study session to watch the video. In a living room in Compton, a grandmother called her daughter into the room. "This is the lady I was telling you about. Look at her, stand her ground." In Portland, a conservative radio host played a small snippet of the exchange on air, only to admit, say what you want about her, but she didn't stutter. Within the hour, Jussia Crockett challenge was trending, not as a joke, but as a way for people to post their own stories of speaking truth to power. Teens uploaded videos of themselves calling out racism in schools. Teachers uploaded clips of curriculum they refused to skip. Lawyers shared cases they'd fought for years, each captioned with Jasmine's words. Meanwhile, in the West Wing, aides were scrambling. Trump had returned to the presidential suite of his Dallas hotel, fuming. "She got under my skin, please," he barked at his comms director. "She's a nobody. She had a moment. That's it." But his advisors were already in damage control mode. "Sir, the problem is it's not just one clip, it's 5, and they're everywhere." Fox News opened their hour with a cautious spin. Fiery exchange at Race Forum. Did Trump take the bait? CNN leaned in harder. Congresswoman Crockett dismantles racial narrative live on air. Even The Hill, usually more restrained, ran a headline that read, "Crockett's calm, one voice, one binder, one night that changed the race conversation." By morning, Jasmine's office was buried in emails, some full of gratitude, some angry, many from everyday people. "I felt seen for the first time. My son watched with me. He said he wants to run for office now. I cried last night, and I'm not even American." But it wasn't just praise. There were threats too, anonymous voicemails, burned out social profiles, posts calling her ungrateful, aggressive, radical, all the usual labels that came out when a black woman didn't shrink. Her staff offered to cancel her next public event, but she refused. "I didn't speak up to go quiet now," she said. "If they're mad, that means they heard me." Back in Washington, congressional allies reached out. Some privately, some publicly. A few white moderates who hadn't returned her calls in months suddenly wanted to grab lunch. Pundits debated whether she'd go national, whether she had presidential potential. But Jasmine wasn't talking to them. She was on the phone with Darnell's mother. They cried together, not out of sadness, but out of something else, something like peace. "He would have been proud of you," the woman whispered. "He's why I did it," Jasmine said. By the third day, the White House held a press briefing. The new press secretary, a fast-talking man in his 40s, tried to turn things around. "What the president meant was," a reporter interrupted. "We've heard what he meant. We want to know why a sitting president couldn't answer a teenager's question about justice without pivoting to crime stats." He didn't have an answer. Meanwhile, Jasmine released a short video, just 1 minute long, recorded from her district office. No music. No fancy production. "To every young person who's ever been told to wait their turn, to be quiet, to be more polite while facing injustice. Don't," she said. "Tell the truth, stand tall, and don't let anyone convince you that silence is strength." That clip became the most shared political video of the month. But all that attention didn't change who Jasmine was. And in a few days, she'd take the conversation somewhere the media wouldn't follow. By the end of the week, the dust hadn't settled. It had thickened. Jasmine Crockett's name was on every news ticker, her face on magazine websites usually reserved for celebrities and world leaders. But while media outlets scrambled to frame her as the surprise voice of the year, Jasmine herself was already back in her district, walking through the parking lot of an underfunded middle school in Terrell, Texas. A local teacher named Mrs. Clay had reached out days earlier. She didn't ask for a photo op. She just wanted her 8th grade civics class to hear directly from the woman who had spoken like she wasn't afraid of the president. Jasmine agreed without hesitation. When she arrived, the classroom was full of kids, wide-eyed, alert, and whispering. A few had practiced questions on note cards. One wore a t-shirt with a hand-drawn quote, "We are not guests." Jasmine stood at the front, not behind the teacher's desk, but in front of it. She didn't give a lecture. She told a story. "Power doesn't always look like what you expect," she said. "It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's just being the one in the room who refuses to stay quiet when it matters." One student asked, "Were you scared standing up there next to the president?" Jasmine smiled. "No, because I wasn't standing for myself. I was standing for Darnell, for my students, for people who've been waiting for someone to stop softening the truth just to stay invited to the table." Meanwhile, at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the conversation wasn't so reflective. Trump had been quieter than usual, at least publicly. His team debated whether to issue a formal response or let the media cycle move on. But privately, he was still livid. "Why are we even giving this woman airtime?" he ranted during a strategy call. "She's nobody." One of his aides hesitated. "Sir, respectfully, she's not nobody anymore." That was the moment Trump hung up. Back on the ground, Jasmine's staff was fielding requests from networks, podcasts, universities, even an invite to speak at the Kennedy Center's annual Justice Symposium. She turned most of them down. "I didn't do this for panels," she told her chief of staff. "I did it because people need to hear the truth while they're still willing to listen." But the impact had already taken root. In Detroit, a city council meeting opened with a recording of Jasmine's speech before launching into a debate about police funding. In Albuquerque, a high school English teacher used the transcript to teach rhetorical strategy and truth-telling in modern politics. In Cleveland, a mother organized a community listening session using Crockett's lines as conversation starters. Not everyone praised her, of course. A group of conservative donors launched a media blitz labeling her divisive. One op-ed claimed she had disrespected the dignity of the presidency. Jasmine responded only once, on her district newsletter. She wrote, "Dignity begins with honesty. I'll never apologize for either." Even some black leaders were split. A few older politicians questioned whether she had gone too far,